2003 was a slow year for first-person shooters as both Doom and Half-Life 2 got delayed to 2004, leaving many action fans to their own devices. In the meanwhile, Eastern European developers took advantage of the demand and pushed their games onto the market. Chaser is one of these games, released in the middle of 2003 for PC and developed by Slovakian developer Cauldron. You wake up in a space station with no memories whatsoever, only to be greeted by commandos that just so happen to be looking for you. You then set out to escape the station, find out what the mess you're in is all about, and get your hands on the one responsible for getting you involved in it. The storytelling is a mix of cinematics and scripted events that successfully depicts a broken, worn-down world filled with dubious characters and run by organized crime. The voice acting and a few plot holes do drag it down somewhat, but this is still an enthralling adventure with some rather surprising twists and an unforgettable ending. Chaser is an old-school shooter, which means that for the most part you'll either engage in combat or platforming sections. Enemies can kill you within an instant of seeing you, and death-defying jumps are constant, making for a very hard game. In fact, you could argue that the game is too hard. The minute multiple enemies have you in their sights is the minute you might as well quick load. And jumping sections are particularly bad since Chaser doesn't even flinch when falling down a great height, despite losing health. And if you think the slow-mo will help, think again. The game's adrenaline mode slows time down to a quarter, and to top it off, it even cuts out the music, making it no fun to use. How Cauldron could fuck up bullet time is beyond comprehension, especially given that games that used it properly were released way before Chaser was. But Chaser's biggest problem is its horribly inconsistent level design. Some of the levels reach Half-Life levels of brilliance, whereas others are just confusing or downright cheap. It's abundantly clear that Cauldron had a small budget and no playtesting, as getting lost or killed instantly is a real worry here. In fact, 2/3 into the game you might as well bind your mouse buttons to quick save and quick load, as turrets and power armored goons will tear you apart within milliseconds, and even entering slow motion will barely keep you alive. And that's on easy. Unless you have godlike reflexes, half the time you spend on the normal difficulty will be on saving and loading. What's worse, on easy the grenades are nerfed for both you and the enemies. That means fewer insta-deaths, but it also means that hitting and running with grenades is no longer a viable option. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. The levels are also often confusing, as many times you'll miss a room or switch that is essential to progressing. There's no map to speak of, and even worse, levels are frequently made up of repetitive corridors with little to no signposting. Imagine Half-Life only without all the subtle markers, and you've got a good idea about how stilted Chaser's pacing really is. Thankfully, the multiplayer saves things somewhat, as the mode is a lot of fun. There are two modes still being played, Deathmatch and Shock Troops. While Deathmatch is standard, Shock Troops is more akin to Counter-Strike. You only respawn in the next round in this mode, and victory is achieved by either completing the objective or taking out the enemy team. But the twist here is that in order to get your hands on stronger weapons, you'll need to earn rank points, which you can only receive by killing other players and staying alive. It's a neat idea, and the multiplayer in general is good fun, but unfortunately the community is very small, and to get it running, you'll need to install a third-party launcher. Chaser's visuals have actually aged mostly well. The levels are truly humongous, and most of the texture work still holds up to this day. Facial animation is surprisingly good, but the game lacks ragdoll physics, and the death animations are glitchy and jerky. Movement animations in general are a bit stiff, but the death animations in particular can really take you out of the experience. The game even supports widescreen resolutions natively, though it does so by cutting off the top and bottom of the picture. In terms of voice acting, Chaser is very hit or miss. Some of it is really well done,
Where's Chaser? I can't get him anywhere.
whereas the rest of it is, well, not very impressive.
What do you need?
I need to get to Mars.
Otherwise, however, the soundtrack is absolutely fantastic, helping create an intense atmosphere, and the sound effects are terrific as well, with strong gunfire and ricochet sounds making encounters feel real. The game's translation is also kind of broken, unfortunately, probably due to the small budget. It's abundantly clear that the script wasn't originally written in English, as evidenced by some truly baffling lines of dialogue. But the weird thing is, Chaser didn't have a Czech, much less a Slovakian version, which makes you wonder what really happened to the script and its translation. Chaser is a great game thanks to its atmosphere and story, and one can only imagine what would have been if Cauldron was given more time and a proper budget. It still comes recommended, especially to FPS veterans, but if you're the more casual player, it's not really for you.